This is Huntsville Sports Weekly, where we talk all things Huntsville, Texas sports, Hornets, Bearcats, and more. And now, here's your hosts, Rob Hipp and Josh Criswell.
All right, friends. Well, welcome to another edition of Huntsville Sports Weekly. I'm Rob Hipp. We are live here at Bauer Stadium, Josh. No, we're not. I'm Rob Hipp here with KSAM, but also, as always, alongside my good friend Josh Criswell, the Huntsville Item. It looks like we're at Bauer's, but we're just doing a little video fun. Josh, good to see you, man.
Good to see you as well. I like the new enhancements you made. It doesn't look like Bauer's behind us. A little bit more green, but I like our new upgrades and kind of upgrading the experience for all the fans out there.
Well, it's kind of been a whirlwind today through the Southland Conference. You know, we heard from the Southland, of course. We heard from Sam Houston State. I'll let you seg into that. We've got a lot packed here on this show tonight.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously kind of a disheartening day for college sports, and particularly the Southland Conference, which earlier this morning announced that it had postponed all fall sports with hopes to conduct championships in the spring. So things started off today. We're going to hear from a couple people during today's show. First off, Tom Burnett, Southland Conference Commissioner, going to get his thoughts on what a FCS playoffs in the spring could look like. And we're also going to hear from Trevor Williams here, Sam Houston State linebacker, in the opening segment. After that, we have a nice sit-down with Sam Houston State Athletics Director Bobby Williams to talk about, you know, the whole process and everything that's been going on over there the past few months, and kind of looking ahead as well. And we'll close things off with a conversation with KAGS TV's Mike Lucas. Does a great job over there and covers the Southland Conference for them, and then wrapping it up with today's press conference with Sam Houston State football coach Casey Keeler.
Awesome. And I just wanted to say before we get it, Josh, you look a lot better on the camera than I do tonight. So it's great, man. We're going to dig right in. Here is that interview with Southland Commissioner Tom Burnett from earlier today. Enjoy it. We'll be back here in a few
questions. And, you know, obviously we have an investment because when things are maybe normal, we've been hosting the FCS championship game here in Frisco for the last decade, and certainly looking forward to the beginning of a new 5-year agreement here in Frisco. That probably separate for now. Right now it's about, you know, like you asked, what could that possibly look like? And I don't know that I exactly know. I think there's been some modeling that I think the one expectation I would share with you, Josh, don't expect a 24-team bracket like we normally have. I think what we're learning with our NCAA championships, and this probably shouldn't surprise anyone, everything they do to try to provide the championship experiences is going to become more expensive because we have to assume we're still going to be in the COVID era. There's going to have to be testing done. Travel is different than it has been. You know, I don't know that you can put a football team on 2 buses anymore. It might be 4 or 5 buses. So airline travel is going to be different. So there's an expectation that any NCAA championships are going to be much more expensive. Further, I think you're going to see brackets maybe reduced in size. I mentioned, again, don't expect the 24-team bracket, but you may not be able to expect the 64-team bracket in volleyball or soccer. You may expect to see NCAA championships played at fewer sites to better control the environment as opposed to teams participating all over the country. So there's a lot of complications they're going to work through. Once that gets established, though, that's going to allow us to then work back with some scheduling ideas. We've done some modeling on what, you know, internally on what that spring could look like. But that's a simple exercise of picking up your current schedule and sliding it to another place on the calendar and seeing what it looks like and how it impacts other events. You know, we've got a big basketball tournament planned for March, early March. We've got other championship events. There's the Final Four planned in the beginning of April. So there are a lot of complications that are going to take some time to answer, but I know a lot of good people are working on it. Picking up your current.
All right, Josh. Well, that was, of course, Southland Commissioner Tom Burnett. And, you know, just, again, we've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of folks today and to hear from a lot of people today as well.
Yeah, and, you know, Rob, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts. You know, what's been your reaction and sort of your takeaway from the past few days, and also just from speaking, I guess, you know, first off to Southland Conference Commissioner Tom Burnett. I think, they might have taken a little bit longer as far as the Southland than some people would have liked. I know a lot of the student athletes and coaches out there around the league probably wanted some answers a little bit sooner than we got them, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, given everything that's going on, and especially whenever it comes down to it with football not having that opportunity to compete for a fall championship, I think they ultimately made the right move by pushing everything to the spring, kind of putting the health and just kind of managing the situation at the forefront.
Yeah, and you'll hear it in more interviews here in a little bit. I know we're having some audio issues. We'll get those figured out here in just in a little bit, folks. So thanks for bearing with us on that. I've talked about this, Josh. Sam Houston, literally, you hear so many universities, not putting down anybody else, but you talk to so many people that say, hey, we care about the students' safety. Well, when you decide that even if you have an opportunity to have a non-conference game, that you're not even going to do that, that is truly putting the student safety first, and I think that's huge.
Absolutely. You saw them do it. You saw some other schools. I know McNeese is one that, actually had some things planned. We're going to go hit the field, this week to start fall practice, but they actually made the decision, just didn't think the optics would look right. Going on and playing one or two games to get some money, and we'll talk about it a little bit later with KAGS TV's Mike Lucas, but it just seems like you either need to play all the games or you just the half and half thing. I just don't think the optics of it, with everything going on in the world right now, would have been a good situation for anyone.
Well, you're exactly right, and we've heard from students. We're going to hear now from Trevor Williams here. Your thoughts on Trevor before we go into this? Just another great athlete. And you talk about the defensive stars on these teams. He's another standout player.
Yeah, I was glad that we got to talk to Trevor today because we haven't heard from him very much. Might have interviewed him once before this, leading up to this time. Just has kind of been in the background playing behind, great seniors last year, Royce and Hunter Brown. So this year was going to be his year, and hopefully in the spring will be. Hopefully he'll get that chance. But he's a guy from A&M Consolidated, just down the road in College Station, and a guy that entire team could not be more excited about, and we'll hear from him right now.
You see other conferences just around the country, things like that. You couldn't help but just think of it as a possibility of happening. So when it did, it did hurt, but at the same time, it's just kind of understanding everything that's going on. So a little disappointed, but we'll be just fine. We'll be all right.
Was it the decision you guys expected, or did it kind of take you by surprise?
Well, it's kind of a little bit expected just because, like I said, all the other conferences, things like that, they were kind of in the talks and things like that. So, when we got the news, it was like, okay, we figured it was probably going to happen, but it's at this point it is what it is. We just have to accept it and just keep working from there. So.
Sure, there's a lot of, of course, with all this going on, there's been a lot of negatives going around. Talk about some of the positives, maybe some things that you can take away from this on the positive angle.
Right. Well, I told the rest of the linebackers, we got some young guys in here now, and I told them with all this here going on, I said, take this as an opportunity to get better, take advantage of this, use this time to get better mentally, to get better physically, physically in shape, get bigger, stronger, faster, things like that. So, just like I said, just take advantage of this opportunity, and then only good things can come out of this. So,
what's the thing about this group, and especially that defense of yours that makes you think that y'all can kind of emerge from this, and whenever y'all do play a season, y'all can kind of capitalize on the opportunity.
Right. I met me and some other leaders on the defense. We met with the DC, and he just told us. This is tough, but at the end of the day, we all have to stay together, stick together. We have a very, very good chance of being a very great defense, and we can't get down on ourselves. We can't drag around anything like that. Just have to use this time to constantly get better, work at it, and just take it day by day, and we'll be good from there. Well, Rob, we just heard from Trevor Williams, junior linebacker at Sam Houston State. Rob, we're going to hear from Sam Houston State AD Bobby Williams here in just a few moments. Had a great sit-down interview with him, but, first things first, what were your thoughts about what we just heard from Trevor?
I think Trevor, I asked him something in the interview. I don't know if it came across on there, but talking about take away some of the positives. And we heard from him, and these kids are getting an opportunity now, Josh, to really maybe practice a little bit more. I know there's some NCAA guidelines, and we still don't have a lot of clarity on a lot of that. Definitely if you got input, provide it, but we don't have a whole – let's just say this. We go back to March, and everything has been – I hate to use the word because it's so cliche, but everything's been so fluid. You hear that so many times, and unprecedented. You hear these words all the time. But the fact of the matter is, we hear from Trevor. He talks about some of the positives also, talking about just how he gets to spend more time with his teammates. He gets to learn more. He gets to develop more as a leadership. And I think we're going to see a lot of that as we go forward, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of looking at Sam Houston State on the other side of the ball on the offense, Casey Keeler's going to mention it when we hear from him in the press conference at the end of the show. But, one of the things that he talked about earlier this offseason was how that offensive line was a little bit of a question mark just because you lose 4 starters over there that were key guys as seniors last year. Have a lot of talented guys coming in, some guys that were younger, maybe didn't get as much experience before, that are hopefully going to be stepping into some bigger roles for them. And, all this does is it just gives them a couple more months to kind of gel together. So I think pushing everything back to the spring and playing the season then, I think Casey Keeler says it in the interview, is, it could be when they're playing their best football.
Some other questions that I don't know if we've captured them in these interviews, but something I wanted to bring up real quick, and we can definitely tack on at the end of our podcast here, and that'll be a little bit later. But you talk about a team or a football season that is planned now to start in the spring. Still nothing set in stone, but that's the goal. We still don't know what's going to happen, of course, with COVID, but now that's the new plan. And could we possibly have 20 games in 1 year? That is something that would be unprecedented. We talked to Coach about that.
And I don't think you could.
You can't do that.
I don't think that there's any plans to have 20 games or whatever it is. This 24 games, whatever it is. It's just too many. I think if we see anything, we're going to see an abbreviated conference-only type of spring schedule. And then go back. You're going to bump things back at least a couple weeks in the fall, maybe a month or month and a half, to kind of just give them that added break. And then maybe you cut some games, shave some games off of there. But it's going to be tricky. One of the things that Bobby Williams talked about today was that there's a lot of logistical challenges, and that's kind of a common theme, and it's going to be a common theme because you're going to have all your sports playing in the spring. And I think you could have baseball on Wednesday or baseball on Thursday, volleyball the next day, and then softball the next day, football the next day, all rolled up into 1 week. So it's going to be a challenge for everybody across the board, not just the players, the coaches, us, the staff over there. It's going to be kind of a team effort to get this thing rolling and get those championships happening in the spring.
Well, we had a chance to catch up with Sam Houston State University, of course, athletic director Bobby Williams. We'll play that interview now. We'll be back here in just a few moments. It's Huntsville Sports Weekly.
Joined right now by Sam Houston State Athletics Director Bobby Williams. Bobby, obviously a disheartening day in college sports, and especially the Southland. The league announced that y'all are postponing all fall sports and with hopes to play in the spring. For you as a former student athlete and coach and now administrator, what's just been the toughest part of this whole situation to navigate?
Well, it's just having to deliver that news. This is the second time I've had to do this. I guess the biggest difference is from the spring, from March 13th to now, is the fact that there wasn't much hope that we were going to be able to play back then. Now at least we have some hope and various levels of whether or not we can do it or not, but at least we do have some hope. And as a former student athlete, a coach, you put yourself in their position and you try to be as compassionate and understanding as you can and encouraging as you can be, because when you look at what they're going through, it is disappointing, and it's a challenge to deal with mentally, and trying to stay positive from there. But so far so good. I mean, the student athletes, I communicate with them extremely openly about the decision process, and while they may disagree with decisions that we make, hopefully they respect the process that we've gone through as athletic directors and on campus as well.
Right, and then I think in the Southland's release this morning, they noted that the presidents have kind of given the go-ahead for planning to start for volleyball, soccer, and cross-country championships. And then also, obviously, with football kind of falling below that 50% threshold, the last chance for an FCS playoffs will be in the spring. With y'all, especially on the football field, being a team that wants to contend for national titles, how much did that kind of play into the decision-making in that sport as far as the, deciding to cancel the fall and kind of move forward with hopes of competing for a national title in the spring?
I think that's important because obvious is the health and safety of everyone and trying to deal with everything and the logistics and the testing and everything that goes from there. But sometimes one of the things that's forgotten is that student athlete experience. And I think in the last 15 years, our student athletes have had a certain standard, certain level of expectation of that experience, and it includes NCAA postseason, it includes competing for conference tournament championships, conference regular season championships, and playing a full season. So all that comes into play. in my decision making, and I've shared that with student athletes, our student athlete advisory council, head coaches. They know how I feel about that. I know a lot of people are looking at independent schedules and pushing for those type of things, but I think from our perspective, it's got to rise to our standard of what we've expected the last 15 years and that experience level to trigger some of those things. I think looking at it in spring gives us the best opportunity to do that. It's not optimal because you've got a lot of competition factors and recovery times and different things like that. But I think at this point, based on everything that we've seen, it gives us the best opportunity to create that experience.
Right, and obviously, an unprecedented time for y'all as an athletics department, and then also for the student athletes. For you, just looking at them and how they've handled it, what's the thing that's impressed you the most about Sam Houston State's student athlete population?
Well, they're very mature in how they handle things. I even shared with them, I played in a different area in football, and where you would run through the wall for coaches and do things like that. I appreciate that they question that a lot more. And they understand the decision process, and if you explain how you came to that, they will give you positive input back and support you on that. And I'm very, very proud of that. Also, I'm very proud of the fact that because it's been so difficult from a communication standpoint to stay ahead of decisions and to basically get that information out, I'm very proud of our head coaches and our coaching staff and academic staff and everyone involved of being able to be that voice for me when I can't speak to everyone. Because of the number of Zoom calls that I've been on and conference calls and trying to get that out in a timely fashion, I think I'm really proud of the fact of our communication lines have worked and how our student athletes have responded in a calm and a manner in a difficult time and been supportive of what we're doing.
Right, and just, kind of a different topic, but, obviously recently, President Dana White recently retired. I know everyone I talk to in the athletics department kind of always seems to mention her and just the support that she had for athletics here at Sam Houston State. For you as someone who ran the athletics department, how big was her impact, during your time here, whenever y'all were working together?
Very positive impact, and she cared a lot about athletics, but she cared about the students at this university quite a bit, and at a high level, and really represented this university at a high level. Of course, I got to work with her prior to becoming president when she was the VP for Finance and Operation, and she understood what we did, and gave us solutions, just like she did across campus as well. It's been very interesting with Dr. White coming on board Monday in the transition, especially with the board here this week and different things like that. I've met with all three of them the last 3 days, had been on the phone the last few because we've had such transition in some of the decisions, not only as a university, but in athletics and me dealing with that. And the communication between the three of us has just been at a quality level. And what's really been nice with Dr. White is, even though she's coming in new, she has been dealing with, whether it's getting the university back started or dealing with athletics and things like that. So she's very up to speed and aware of the decisions that we're making. And to have that ability to have two presidents and an athletic director be a part of the decision and to come to the same conclusion has just been a great experience.
All right, just
hey, Josh, sorry, about 2 minutes left. If that's cool.
Yeah.
Space, sorry.
Sounds good. I guess just one last question for you. Going off of that, you mentioned how Lisa White's come in and has kind of been able to step right in, and immediately y'all have that connection. How much do you think it helps having a president come in that's coming from another FCS school that's probably has dealt with a lot of the similar challenges that y'all deal with here at SAM?
Well, it cuts down on the explanation or the education part of that of what kind of decision you're making and how you're dealing with it, because she's been dealing with the conferences. She's been dealing with several things that we've been dealing with. And I noticed that the first day is I'd start trying to over-explain in some aspects, and I realize I don't have to. She's already very aware of this. She's aware of PCR testing, antigen testing, where it applies, decisions to make into play or postpone. And so that's been really positive. And it leaves the anxiety level, too, of making the decision, because they understand what you're talking about and they can give you positive feedback.
From your standpoint, being in this role for such an incredible amount of time and just being here with these kids, What would you tell students right now if there was an athlete that said, man, that's looking to go to college, but just things are so uncertain? What would your message be to those student athletes right now, Coach?
That's a really great question. There's so many unknowns out there, but I think what it's really teaching all of us, especially this generation of student athletes, is you keep pushing forward and making your decision and trying to go, but you really have to have some ability to deal with adversity and to be able to adjust to every decision that is made and change, and keep that openness from there. And the other thing is, from a mental frame of mind, is just stay positive, look for people that invigorate you and keep you on a positive track and moving forward.
All right, friends, well, welcome back. Rob Hipp here with KSAM alongside my good friend Josh Criswell, the Huntsville Item. Hope you've been enjoying episode 3 now with Bobby Williams, hearing from him. A lot just going on throughout the Southland Conference and with Sam Houston State University. Talking about all these components, we did have a chance, Josh, to catch up with another media member just down the road in College Station. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, our good friend Mike Lucas does a great job down at KAGS TV in Bryan College Station, as you mentioned. Covers the Aggies, all high school sports, so you might see him covering some of the Huntsville Hornets opponents this fall, A&M and Consolidated, and Brian Rutter in particular. But, today he's another guy that covers the Southland Conference just like us. So, kind of a situation where we've talked to a lot of, conference members with the commissioner. We've talked to ADs, players, coaches. But now we kind of just get to do a little bit of analysis and really just, the three of us give our thoughts on what's been a crazy and disheartening week, but one that hopefully ends up being a positive in the end.
Well, here is that interview now with Mike Lucas of KAGS
We're
TV.
here at Huntsville Sports Weekly. I'm Rob Hipp along with Josh Criswell and Mike Lucas joining us from KAGS. Mike, kind of a strange day. I think a lot of us expected this, but now to hear it officially, just your initial thoughts, man.
I mean, it sucks. Like, we don't have football in the fall to the capacity we're used to. We'll still have A&M, at least down in our neck of the woods, but no Southland Conference football in a town like Huntsville that's football hungry. I mean, I already miss football. We haven't even had a chance to have our fall camp, quote unquote stories and all that. Like, that's the best time of the year, in my opinion. Find out some of these feature stories, find out new pieces of the team, guys you could be looking forward to, how they're going to replace certain positions, and just thinks that we're not going to get that chance this year.
Right, we obviously just got through talking to some different people over at Sam Houston State from the football side. Trevor Williams, linebacker, head coach Casey Keeler, Bobby Williams, athletics director, and volleyball coach Brenda Gray. What was your initial reaction to hearing everything that the people at Sam Houston State had to say today?
I thought it was really interesting they decided, as an institution, they don't want to play a non-conference game. Now, a lot of these non-conference games are the moneymakers for these schools, but as head coach Casey Keeler said, we're not playing for a national championship. We as an institution don't deem it important enough to play, and that's not the same mindset that some of the other Southland Conference schools have. So I think they're seeing that differentiation and their commitment to staying on track, keeping their student athletes healthy, and not just in COVID, but healthy for the spring and whatever happens next fall. I think that was interesting just to hear the deviation from the norm, which you would think would be, hey, we can play non-conference, let's go make that money.
Right, and honestly, it kind of seemed like there was a lot of optimism early last week, and that's all really changed over the past, 10 days or so. What do you think, outside of obviously the playoffs and health factors, what do you think are some of the other reasons that kind of drove this decision?
As far as not playing?
Yeah.
Just the uncertainty. I don't know the answers. You don't know the answers. Rob, you don't know the answers. The Southland Conference Commissioner today said, I don't know the answers. No one knows the answers to the questions that I think to play football in the fall, people need to be comfortable with and kind of have an answer for. And as we've seen with the SEC and the Big Ten, you can find a doctor to confirm or support your evidence no matter what it is. You have ACC doctors saying it's safe. You have Big Ten doctors saying it's not safe. Who's right, who's wrong? Obviously, no one knows right now. So I just think until there's a little more certainty, everyone's going to just continue to follow the path that they want to be on.
And I just want to say, Mike and Josh, just kudos to Sam Houston State University, because not only are they talking about safety, but they're showing it here today by saying, look, even if we had the opportunity for a non-conference game, we're not going to put our students at risk. And I think that is such a wise decision, and that's my own personal opinion, of course. but it really does. You got to give kudos to Sam Houston State because they truly are putting the students' safety first, and that's what's most important right now.
Yeah, and I mean, you said it perfectly. I mean, if you're not safe enough to play conference games, what suddenly makes you safe to play non-conference games? I think, in my opinion, it all comes down to money. And I like Rob said, you do have to give kudos to Sam Houston State for saying, obviously, they're in a little bit different situation than some schools in the conference financially, where some of those schools just have to play those games to kind of keep things afloat. But I think with Sam Houston State, I think it's a solid decision, to say across the board, I think it would have been a bad look if you say, we're not going to play conference, but we're going to go out and get this check from X university.
A couple people asked Tom Burnett, the commissioner, this morning, hey, why are you allowed to play non-conference games if it's not safe enough to play conference games? And
valid question.
Once again, no real definitive answer to that question. I think we all know the underlying meaning, but until we have more of those answers, it's a risk in the schools at liability if something were to happen.
Well, Mike, we know you got to go, man. It's Mike Lucas with KAGS out of College Station. Before we let you go, how can people find you? You guys on the TV and do such an incredible job covering sports throughout this area, and we appreciate you coming here to Huntsville. How can folks connect with you and find out what you're doing, man?
Easiest things, find me on Twitter. It is KAGS_Lucas, KAGS_ then Lucas, LUCAS. Most of my tweets are semi-okay, so that's my endorsement of myself. So.
Awesome. We'll step aside and take a break. It's more Huntsville Sports Weekly when we come back.
All right, it was good to catch up there and hear from another member of the media. Appreciate all that Mark Lucas does over at KAGS TV. You heard his information there, so you can get in touch with him. Follow him on Twitter. And Josh also wanted to mention a special shout-out to Sheridan McGrew, because that was kind of an improv, I guess, if you will, interview right there at the end, and Sheridan held the phone for us. He's over at the Bearcat Sports Network. So Sheridan, appreciate all that you do for Sam Houston State University, man. You're incredible. Josh, we also had a chance to catch up with head coach K.C. Keeler finally as well.
Yeah, some interesting comments from head coach K.C. Keeler. Before we kind of dive into what he said, a couple of, things to note. Mike brought it up a little bit during our interview with him, but, Sam Houston State head coach K.C. Keeler, we're about to listen to what he had to say at the press conference today. And, one of the things he mentioned is that, if they can't play for a national championship in the fall, they don't really see the point of playing this fall. They're just going to wait for the spring, it sounds like, unless something unforeseen happens in the coming weeks. Sounds like they're not going to play something that, the Southland Conference did, allow teams to have limited fall competition. Sounds like the Bearcats are going fully to the spring. There have been a couple in the conference, however, that are doing things a little bit differently. UCA still plan to open up the season in week 0 against Austin Peay in the FCS Kickoff Classic out in Alabama, I believe. And they're trying to schedule, as many opponents as they can. SFA, it sounds like, wants to be the only FCS team to play an 11-game schedule this fall. And head coach Colby Carthel over there, made it sound like his team has zero interest in playing spring football. He cites the back-to-back thing that we discussed, going from playing a shortened spring season going into the fall. Obviously, they have a little less to play for than the teams like Sam Houston State and some of the others in the conference, with them getting that postseason ban due to APR penalties. So they're not going to be playing in the postseason regardless of when they play. So SFA might have a little more motivation than other schools in the league as far as getting their season over with this fall. But head coach K.C. Keeler brought up a couple of really interesting points. Talks a lot about his team and just this whole process, and we'll hear from him right now.
Yeah, tough day. We've been tugged a lot of different ways, a lot of rumors out there. You read one report, you think you're playing, then you read another report, you say, we're not going to play. And I think for the kids, I think it was nice to finally get, okay, this is what we're going to do moving forward. So I addressed the team this morning, and I could tell there was disappointment. But at the same time, our mindset is that we want to be in the worlds of the James Madisons and the North Dakota States, and if you can't play for a national championship this fall, we'd rather find another time that we can get a chance to get in that competition. This is a program that in the last 10 years has been in 5 Final Fours. So that's kind of the mentality we have, and it's we want to be with the big boys trying to win a national championship, and it's obviously not going to happen in the fall. So let's see if we can put some ideas together and see if a spring season is possible. Right now, I don't know if anyone knows if that's possible or not, because no one's put enough thought into it, but that's going to be the next thing we're going to do.
Coach, have you heard anything or seen any developments as far as what that spring FCS season and postseason could look like?
No, I mean, I think some people are saying we don't want to try anything before January 1st. I mean, there's been some talk, like, hey, once we start in December, kids are all leaving, almost create a bubble for our guys in terms of practice and prepping for a season. But I think the FCS conferences, have to get together and start talking and saying, okay, how does this all work for all of us? Because, you don't come to Sam Houston to play 6 or 7 games. You come to Sam Houston to win a national championship. And I think we'd be all really excited about trying to play for a national championship if it's going to be in the spring. Let's just figure out how we're going to do that.
And does leaving that door open for that spring season kind of give you a little bit of optimism, especially with this being such a big senior class that you have?
Yeah, and quite honestly, I think our best team will be in the spring or next fall because I think it's going to give us an opportunity to get that offensive line. I mean, I love the talent on the offensive line. I mean, I've been really impressed with the pure talent. It's just now we need some time to get those guys together. So I'm one of those glass half full guys, and that's what I told the guys. I said, listen, for you guys who are going to graduate in December, you get a chance to either start grad school or maybe even for some guys finish grad school or get a second major. So there's opportunities for our guys academically. We have a big senior class. There's a lot of guys who can kind of figure out what they want to do academically. And like I said, our mentality is we want to kind of be in the fight for a national championship. And, once, James Madison was out of it, North Dakota State was out of it, I think, our mindset was if the Southland decides to move on and not play in the fall, we'll be fine with that.
Coach, even if there was a non-conference game, first, is that even a possibility? If not, is that even worth it at this point?
No, as an institution, we've decided, and I am 100% behind this, we do not want to play an out-of-conference game right now. We just don't see the value of it. We see there's more value in just trying to get our kids. You got to remember, we didn't have the summer that we wanted to have in terms of preparation. We came back in horrible shape, and it wasn't the kids' fault. I mean, I got guys who weren't allowed to leave an apartment in the Bronx because, they were in lockdown for 3 months. I had a bunch of guys up in Dallas that, got kicked out of running on a stadium field because, again, they were in lockdown. So many of our guys, when they came back in June, were just not in the shape that we know they can be with this great strength program we have. And so, glass half full is like, hey, guys, you get a chance to get a full 4 months now with our strength coach. And what a great opportunity to get us bigger, stronger, faster. How we thought we should be in shape when we came in and for August camp, that's the kind of shape we'll be in if we have a spring season. If we don't have a spring season, it gives them even more time to get ready for another fall season. So always try to look at things in a positive way. And again, our players are very disappointed. Our coaching staff is very disappointed. But at the same time, we now need to match up, okay, how's this going to help you academically and for the rest of your life?
Coach, I'm curious, I know the plans for possibly playing in the spring is still so much up in the air, but is it possible to play 2 full seasons in 1 calendar year?
No, I don't think it is. I think what you're going to have to do, you're going to have an abbreviated season in the spring and then possibly push back the fall. So I think, guys smarter than me are going to try figuring out if this is all going to work. And I think that's the next phase is, okay, let's get all those conferences together in FCS and let's kind of see what ideas they have and can we put something together that we all feel really good about. I know at Sam Houston State, the health and safety and well-being of our players is going to be number one. And so we're not going to put them back in a situation in the spring if we don't feel that's the best thing for them. We've already had that discussion. So again, I think we're in an exploratory situation right now. And I think we were all just so focused on trying to play in the fall that now it's like, okay, now it's time to move that aside. Let's go look at the opportunities in the spring and if this is possible to do. And I don't know if it is or not. I know there's going to be some creative work that's going to have to do to be able to play a spring season and then a fall season.
Coach, I've asked this question to several others. I wanted to hear it just from you, from the coaching perspective, about training and workout, those kind of things, practices. How does that affect that from your standpoint as a coach now? And is there any restrictions that we'll see from the delayed start now?
Yeah, so we moved ourselves back to a phase where it's an 8-hour a week with our players. So we're on the field with the players twice a week. Strength coach has them 3 days a week, off on the weekends. We get a chance to use a football right now, at least in terms of the way the rules are. We can have a football out there, kind of doing a walkthrough, can't go against each other. But, we we've done it for about 6 or 7 days, and we've seen a lot of progress with our players. And now it's an opportunity to, kind of switch things up a little bit, maybe do a little bit something different coming up here in the future. But I've seen progress the last 5 or 6 days with what we've been doing, and that's the system we're going to stay in until the NCAA gives us different guidance.
All right, friends, well, welcome back to Huntsville Sports Weekly. I'm Rob Hipp alongside Josh Criswell, the Huntsville Item. Thanks for joining us. Always a fun opportunity here on our third show as we continue to bring you content here. And you're going to hear different things every single week. Coach Casey Keeler there, Sam Houston head football coach, again, just talking about the safety, talking about some of the protocols, talking about if there was an opportunity for a non-conference game that they wouldn't take it. It's just really not worth it. So that was kind of the official confirmation today that there will be no football with Sam Houston State here, of course, in the fall. But in the spring, that could be an opportunity. And Josh, I know you probably want to chime in a little bit on that. But I also wanted to seg also, as you talk about that, we also heard, we didn't have a chance to get the video here, but with volleyball coach Brenda Gray, we heard from her as well. So it's not just football. We want to let folks know it's not just football. This is all fall sports that have been affected by this at Sam Houston State University.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for more on that, make sure to pick up a copy of this weekend's Huntsville Item. We're going to have an in-depth feature. We're going to, see everything, or you'll see, what Brenda Gray had to say, as well as just, some different perspectives from across the board, players, coaches, administrators, just kind of get the broad picture and kind of tie this whole thing together and, what it means for now, and then also, for these student athletes, what it means moving forward, hopefully into playing championships this spring.
I mean, it requires, from us, from a media perspective, of course, it's our livelihood. But again, it's not about us. It's about everybody, and it's about the safety of these students. And I've reiterated that over and over and over. And that's why we're not going to see those non-conference games, even if there was a potential for one. It's just not to the university. It's not that important. You don't want to put these kids in danger. And that brings up another point. For the teams that want to play, that's fine. But what if their athletes get hurt? Then what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. And you're playing in that early schedule. You want these games, but what are you really playing for? And that's what it all comes down to.
Because whenever you peel back the curtains, that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Well, we did have a chance to catch up with many guests here today. Josh, we've got more shows. We try to do this show every Thursday around 6:30. I know today started a little bit late. Today it's really been all about Sam Houston State, but you're going to hear about Huntsville High School on this show as well. We talked to head coach Rodney Southern just last week. Brian Adams joined us. We've got a lot of guests that are going to be here. Matt McRobert, the punter for Sam Houston State. We'll hear from him here maybe next week or very soon. So a lot of really awesome opportunities to stay up to date with the latest in the sports world right here in Huntsville, Texas. I'm enjoying this, Josh. It's been a lot of fun so far.
Absolutely, been a lot of fun, and me personally, a little bit selfish. I'm excited for this weekend because tomorrow, finally covering my first sporting event in what seems like ages. New Waverly has its volleyball opener scheduled for tomorrow as of right now. So we'll hopefully we'll be out there and covering some sports for the first time since mid-March.
I wanted to ask you about, do you know what kind of restrictions are? Are they going to allow fans in the gymnasium? How does that work?
It's going to be very restricted. I was talking with their coach earlier this week, and it sounds like it's going to be pretty much limited to faculty and then also the close family and whatnot of the players themselves. There is potentially the opportunity for some general public tickets, but you're just going to have to, sounds like you just need to reach out to either the coach, Carly Dias, or the New Waverly ISD about purchasing tickets for volleyball home games this fall.
And still no official confirmation yet about Huntsville playing football, but my gut says we're going to have high school football.
Absolutely, and I think the UIL today actually came out with an additional statement regarding, something I know y'all are excited about. The live broadcast this fall finally confirmed that. So I have a little bit of trouble thinking that the UIL is going to, continue putting out these statements, making it seem like we're inching toward that season. I mean, New Waverly, for instance, they're starting here in just a couple weeks at the end of August, and then Alpha Omega just a couple weeks later around the same time as Huntsville. So, I mean, everything's kind of inching closer, and it doesn't seem like at this point like we're going to have these hiccups. As long as everything, everyone stays safe out there, I think we'll be having at least some football this fall.
And the thing about football, you touched on this briefly. UIL did put out a statement today, another press release regarding live telecast. Normally on Friday nights, Josh, as you know, and as I know, of course, you're not allowed to have live video of Friday night football here in the state of Texas. Well, they've lifted that restriction, and now there can be a live telecast or webcast. And, of course, we're going to bring the action. I'm honored to be on the play call this year alongside Brian Adams. So we'll still get a little bit of a football fix, hopefully. That's what we're hoping for. I've actually got a meeting coming up next week with Coach Southern, and I'm sure that we'll know more information. But we're not going to put out any information that's speculative. The only thing that we'll put out, we may put out, well, here's what I hope happens, but we're not going to put out any information, of course, unless it's 100% official. This is exactly what's happening. We want to keep that. So, Josh, I'm excited. Looking forward to next week as we'll have more guests in here. And it's just been a lot of fun so far, man. And hopefully next week we'll get together again. Maybe, look, I know that we're talking about Huntsville sports, but the 4A schools and below are actually starting football this weekend with scrimmages and things like that. So we'll see how that first week goes, and that may be kind of an idea of how it's going to go for 5A and 6A in the high school level.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And, regardless of what happens this fall, the thing we're going to be doing here every week on this show is we're going to still be bringing you some of that sports content, especially, for you Sam Houston State fans that won't be having your sports to watch this fall. I know one thing both of us want to do is kind of catch up to some of these Bearcat legends, Bearcat greats, maybe some iconic Bearcat fans, and just, tell their stories and, hear their side of things. Those are some of my favorite interviews. You just hear things and different stories that you never think that you'd hear ever before.
Well, just a few weeks ago, I had a chance to catch up with Bobby Grisham, the great Bobby Grisham here in Huntsville, who played for not only the Hornets but for Sam Houston State, then went on to be a coach. And I do have his recordings. I've just got to go through and edit them. So we're going to hear from some of that. So much content, and reaching out to you in the community. If you know of someone, or maybe you played on the team at Huntsville Hornets or at Sam Houston State, you said, I'd love to come on and share my story. Why don't you email us? It's real simple. Just email Rob at KSAM1017.com. That's ROB at KSAM1017.com. And also, we're looking for sponsors. Josh with the Huntsville Item and myself, we're working very hard to bring you this content. You can email us as well if you'd like to sponsor this podcast. Josh, I'm going to say, I believe, and we're very humble and grateful for this, combined with KSAM and the Huntsville Item on social media, over 2,000 views last week of the show alone. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I'm just glad to see the community support, and I just hope that y'all keep tuning back in every week. We're going to keep making sure that we bring you at least something. I know all those sports fans, it's been tough. Fortunately, the pro leagues are finally getting back in action. I know I have one or two interviews, a lot of Sam Houston State alums in the media in the Houston area, so hopefully get some of them on maybe here in the future and talk about what it's been like covering sports through a pandemic. But regardless of what happens in sports in the next coming months, we'll be here, bringing y'all some great content every single week.
Well, radio and print media is such an important resource right now with what the work at the Huntsville Item does and what we do here at KSAM. So again, any advertising opportunities, you can reach out to Josh with the Huntsville Item. You can reach out to me here with KSAM for radio advertising. We'd love to help you out. We'd love to have opportunities to sponsor this show. But we'll be back next week. Make sure to tune in 6:30 p.m. Make sure to subscribe to the paper also. But make sure to tune in right back here around 6:30 as we will bring you more of Huntsville Sports Weekly. For Josh Criswell of the Huntsville Item, I'm Rob Hipp. This has been another edition of Huntsville Sports Weekly. Until next time, friends, as I end every broadcast, reminding you tonight that we're not strong enough alone to make it on our own. We need each other, friends. Provide a word of encouragement. Lend a hand of support. Somebody out there needs you. Good night and God bless from Huntsville, Texas. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for joining us.